The Geometry Dash community is obsessed with difficulty. People go crazy over the hardest levels in the game, so it's no surprise when a website dedicated to ranking these levels, especially when they change so much, is under constant crushing pressure by the community. Hi, I'm Echo, the most mid-top Geometry player on the stats field, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the current issues with the Demonlist, from petty drama about FPS to complete and utter oversaturation. And starting with the list itself, the list will never be accurate. Of course, to an extent though. Frozen Cave is obviously harder than a level like Sonic Wave. But when you approach the top 5, it quickly becomes skill set based experience and bias. A player who's beaten VSC, for example, is obviously going to have an easier time with Succumbent Circles than a level like Abyss of Darkness, because Succumbent Circles is all wave, even though AOD is higher on the list. So at face value, Abyss of Darkness should be harder. An example, Fluke's GD aka VSC man grinded out Succumbent Circles as a jump from Acheron, and is now also beating VSC and has level in 2 runs. This guy is not only insane at the game, but is also an example of a really heavy wave skill set. Yet this is countered because the list themselves ask the player how credible they think their opinion is. So someone like Fluke's opinion wouldn't be very reliable, and any outlying opinions are just omitted. So when someone says the most awful take you've ever heard, it usually isn't used. A problem with this though is the silent club step controversy. When all the top players in the race contributed their opinion on the placement, there was no outlier because it was so sporadic. Some thinking it was top 1, some thinking it was top 5. This also links back to skill set. Someone like Cursed beat the level incredibly fast. Maybe a bit too fast, but they did make a lot of progress. Also, by experience, I mean how much you enjoyed the level. This is going to impact how difficult you found it. For example, I beat Wazareta as a hardest a couple months ago, and I hated the level. I beat Wazareta! Yes! Not because of the actual level. In my opinion now, it's one of the best main lists. But I got frustrated easily because I was playing it during a part of my life where school decided to go all out, which made it feel so much harder than it actually was. And bias, of course. If you verify a new supposedly top 1, you're going to want that to be the hardest level, so you're going to be more inclined to call it that, even subconsciously. And not to mention, the list team is a group of teenagers. If you're watching this, you're most likely the same age or older than some of these people, and it's not like they're getting paid to do it, they're volunteers. The money from the ads on the site are going to a site manager, Patrick, which is paying for their tuition fees. The list team are taking time out of their own free time to work on the list and upkeep it, so I feel like the community should just respect them a bit more. Oh, and also the rules of the list. This is pretty controversial, and there's a lot. Like the fact you have to display FPS counters, provide raw footage, etc. And also the allowance of bare bones LDMs. One that fought under fire was Mayhem's LDM, with people saying it looked like a layout, which I see where they're coming from, but also, And that brings me on to the main part of this video. In my opinion, the biggest problem with the list at the moment is the community. We are putting way too much value on this list, and also way too much value on the rules of this list. Starting with 360 FPS Bypass. This is definitely the most controversial part, and I have decently strong beliefs about this. So, oh my god, okay. 360 FPS Bypass is an external mod, not natively in the game, that makes the game easier, and it's not cheating. LM Anubis in his video compared it to aimbot, which wasn't really received too well. But I've been kind of thinking about that recently, and I like to compare it to aim assist. Players with low refresh rate monitors, and in this analogy, consoles, are not going to be able to play / aim as well as players who have a keyboard and mouse, aka high refresh rate monitors. So to try and let people keep up with the top players with high refresh rate monitors, aka 360 FPS monitors, which costs about equal to your right kidney. So to counter this, we use 360 FPS Bypass, just like console users would use aim assist. You still need to be incredibly good at the game to beat top levels like Slaughterhouse. It doesn't magically make you good, but it helps, since if you had a 360 FPS native monitor, it wouldn't be using Bypass, and saying hardware is a hack is kind of just false. 360 FPS lets you click in places you literally physically could not before, which makes timings and levels like the third variant even possible. What could be counter to this is aim assist is built into games, and 360 FPS is an external mod. This isn't a perfect analogy in any way, but there's nothing you can do about it. What's the point of drama about an FPS count when there's already no way to reverse the damage, quote unquote, done by this mod? Out of the 5 victors of Slaughterhouse, 1 used an FPS below 360, and the FPS they used, 330. These levels are far too difficult to be beaten on 240 or below, so even if the list decreased the cap now, the list would become even more inaccessible. And with the Acheron placement soon, Tartarus will be nearly falling out of the top 10. And that's a good thing. 360 FPS should be accessible, and it would be used still without bypass, but to the 0.1% of people who can even consider purchasing a monitor that expensive, these players would rise up to the top a lot more easily than everyone else, and hardly anyone would be able to catch up. But there's another side to it. Because GD's coding is comedically bad, increasing your FPS is proven to literally change the physics of the game, and at really high FPS, the game just breaks. And that's probably why the list isn't either going to decrease or increase the 360 FPS cap on the game. But an even bigger issue at the moment is hacking. The #1 challenge level was at the very top of the list for months, and it was hacked. The verifier of the third variant abused a glitch, making the jumps practically 360 FPS frame perfect. And it kind of makes you wonder, how many hacked records are on the list right now? And the biggest problem for the community? Oversaturation. A few creators at this point are creating top ones for attention, money, and fame, because it's prestigious to be the creator of a top one, and holy shit, people eat top ones up. Look at the view count of any levels verification or showcase in the top 3. They're all 1 million plus. And from my experience with Google AdSense, they've earned anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. But to be fair, most creators are actually passionate about their top 1 project, and they want it to be finished and verified. But the issue here is that 99% of these top ones being made are just clones of each other. For example, Cosmos. Cosmos is an awful layout. This looks f***ing miserable to play. And then the Cherry team comes in and puts so much work into it, making it look awesome with incredible effects that actually distinguish the level from a bunch of other Slaughterhouse remakes. But that's the issue. No matter how much deco you're going to slap in that level, top players are always going to use LDMs because they're putting themselves at a massive disadvantage if they're below 360 FPS. So ultimately, all that matters is the gameplay. This is why, in my opinion, the top levels are becoming incredibly oversaturated, with some following the exact same formulas. These top ones feel incredibly repetitive, and as more and more are being made, to people like me, someone whose hardest is a top 60, it's beginning to feel impossible to get anywhere. So how can you fix this saturation? 2.2 is definitely going to help a lot, with new camera features and gimmicks to work with. But if creators really want to stand out, making creative and new and fun gameplay is going to be exactly the way to do it. Limbo has taken that and ran with it, and it's become incredibly popular for it. It's not some Slaughterhouse remake, there's no abuse of 360 FPS physics, but I feel like the main problem with the Demonlist can be summarized in one comment. At this point, levels are made for lists, not the other way around.